Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Reverend Todd, for your kind introduction. It's very nice to be invited to speak to your very special and important Hoonko service today. Uh, because of the pandemic and because of Zoom, we're able to meet over distances like this. Normally, I probably would not have the opportunity to speak to your Sangha. How wonderful it is to be able to join all of you today. Uh, Before I go into my PowerPoint, just a little bit about my background. Todd mentioned that I'm from Eastern Oregon. Uh, I grew up in a very rural area. The elementary school that I went to, there were only 25 students in the whole school, not the class, in the whole school. 8 grades, 25 students. There were only two in my class. Her name was Mary Lou Coleman, 8 years, my classmate. Easy to remember your classmate's name when you have only one classmate. Well, I went to college and graduate school and all that, but to be honest with you, I'm really not that good of a student because in the 8th grade from my elementary school, I graduated salutatorian, which is second highest in the class, but out of a class of two. Eventually, though, I did graduate valedictorian, and that was when I graduated from the Institute of Buddhist Studies in Berkeley. But how many students do you think were in my class at that time? I was the only student. So you could say that I graduated at the top of my class and at the bottom of my class, both at the same time. So that's a little bit about my background. Uh, Let me share my screen and then I'll go into my talk. Okay, I think everyone could see that. So today is Hoonko, and my topic today is Shinran Shoning's time and our time today. Let's see. Okay. So Shinran Shonin lived in Japan over 800 years ago. And that period of Japan is called the Kamakura period, the Kamakura period. And it was one of the most tumultuous and chaotic periods of Japanese history. It was filled with tragedy, death, and destruction. It was really an awful time in the period of Japanese history. For example, there were the shoguns. Maybe you remember the movie Shogun many years ago, or seeing the movie Last Samurai. Minamoto no Yoritomo, there was the first shogun. So there are all these warring sort of feudal warlords. And there were wars between warrior clans and power struggles. So there were epic battle scenes between these warlords, samurais battling with all their samurai gear. And we all have our favorite samurai movies. Mine is Seven Samurai. Well, what about our time? Who can forget what happened a year ago? The images of January 6th. Can we say we don't have chaos in our society? It was horrendous what we all watched on TV that happened at our nation's capital. During Shinran Shoni's time, there were famines, not enough food. This is a Buddhist art showing the hungry ghost or the gaki. And the hungry ghost, mythical figure, but They are always hungry and thirsty. But this art can only be created because I think at that time they saw people, literally starving. So artists were able to create this image of the hungry ghost. Well, what about our time? We saw these scenes during this pandemic over the past 2 years. People don't have enough food. They're out of jobs. This was cars lined up at a food bank to pick up food because they did not have the finances or resources to purchase food. Cars lined up. These were cars lined up in San Antonio, Texas, to pick up food at a food bank. During Shinran Shoning's time, there were plagues and epidemics, and thousands of people died. Maybe some of you have been to Japan before. This is the Kamo River, right in the heart of downtown Kyoto. It's one of the most scenic places in Kyoto. This is a picture of it at nighttime. So there's these restaurants and drinking places all along this Kamo River. It's beautiful. But one professor told me that during Shinran Shoning's time, the Kamo River was lined with corpses of people who died due to famine or epidemics. The river was just lined with corpses. What about our time? This was an image from last year. This is 50 freezer trucks in Brooklyn filled with unclaimed bodies of COVID victims. 50 freezer trucks. And we all saw these kinds of images on the news. People dying in the hospital alone, families couldn't even be with them. Healthcare workers, nurses, doctors trying to comfort those dying of COVID. And in many cases, in most cases, these individuals died alone. Orange County Buddhist Church lost a member, young father of 3 wonderful daughters, Cleet Ikemoto. He was one of the earlier victims of COVID. Didn't know how he got it. He got ill, went to the hospital, was put on a ventilator. His family couldn't see him, and he died, alone. His 2 daughters were in junior IBA, 1 in junior high school. It's very tragic. Maybe some of you have a relative or close friend who died of COVID. In the United States, at its peak, 4,000 people died from the coronavirus every day. 4,000 people every day were dying. So during Shinran Shoning's time and our time today, it's the same. Political chaos, famine, epidemics, death and human suffering abound. During Shinran Shoning's time, despite the great suffering, he found a sense of peace during a time of conflict. He found something to be settled in, grounded in, during a time of great chaos. And he found something precious, something timeless, something indestructible in the Dharma, in the Nembutsu, in Namo Amida Butsu. Amidst this chaotic, unsettling time of human tragedy and suffering, he found profound truth. And he found light amidst a world of darkness. He found joy amidst a world of sadness, and he found meaning in a world of meaninglessness. One of our minister's assistants, Jim Pollard, over the past several years, he wrote a book on Shin Buddhism. I highly recommend it. It's titled "Let This Be Known." You can order it as an ebook, as a Kindle book, or anyway. He defines Buddhism as liberation from meaninglessness. I think it's a tremendous way of expressing. Buddhism is to be liberated from meaninglessness, a life of meaninglessness. So we chanted Shinran Shonin's Shoshinge and Wasans. This is one of my favorite of his poems. The light of wisdom exceeds all measure, and every finite living being receives this illumination that is like the dawn. So take refuge in Amida, the true and real light. So despite this chaotic world, this world of darkness, Shinran Shonin sees light, sees the light of the Dharma, sees the light of truth in every finite living being. And all beings are illuminating this light of truth, the light of the Dharma. In his main work called the Kyogyo Shinsho, he talks about there's 10 benefits of a life of Shinjin, awakening to our true heart and mind. I'm not going to go into all 10. I just want to mention a couple. The 7th benefit is the benefit of having great joy in our hearts. So despite tragedy and sadness, he also experienced profound joy. And benefit number 10 is the benefit of entering the stage of the truly settled. This is sort of technical Buddhist terminology, but if I were to put this in modern day terms, I would say it means being settled, being grounded in this unstable, unsettling world and society all around you. Despite the chaos, you live a grounded, settled life. You have your core, you have your center. So Shinran Shonin found peace, light, joy, and gratitude amidst the chaos, amidst the social and political unrest, amidst the rampant famine and death due to epidemics during his time. What about us today, in our time? Despite the chaos, despite the unsettling times we find ourselves in, loss of jobs, people short of food, ongoing pandemic. Just when we thought it was going to get better and we were going to be able to reopen, boom, it spikes up again. And now we have to kind of go back to being really careful and everything. So it's just up and down, up and down. Well, we too, despite the situation we're in, we can be led deeper into the Dharma during this time. So to see the chaos and confusion in the world around us, it only affirms the importance, the value of the Buddha Dharma, especially in our lives and in the world today. The world really needs the Buddha Dharma. Humanity needs the Buddha Dharma. So this is our opportunity to truly receive, to truly encounter the Nembutsu, Namu Amida Butsu, in our own hearts and minds. So we too, we can become settled in unsettling times. We can have a sense of peace amidst conflict and chaos. We can find joy and gratitude amidst our own grief and sadness. So I see no difference no difference between Shinran Shoning's time and our time today. The humanitarian challenges and the issues are the same. But just as new forms of Buddhism arose in the Kamakura period to respond to the great sufferings of humanity, so too can Buddhism rise in this country to respond to the sufferings of humanity today. So this Kamakura period, Buddhism had already a long history. And so this Kamakura period brought in sort of a new form of Buddhism compared to the previous era of Heian and Nara periods of then older Buddhism. So Zen Buddhism from Dogen, Nichiren Buddhism from Nichiren, and Pure Land Buddhism from Honen Shonin and Shinran Shonin arose and grew in this Kamakura period in response, I think, to this conditions of society at that time. Our Jodo Shinshu has an 800-year history in Japan, from Shinran Shonin, Renyo Shonin, and others. Shin Buddhism has grown greatly in Japan, and its teachings have resonated with people, gave them comfort, peace, and joy. But Jodo Shinshu in Japan is facing the challenge of decreasing membership, even greater than our decrease in membership in our BCA. Our Nishi Honganji has 10,000 temples. 10,000 temples. We have 58 in the BCA. Nishi Honganji has 10,000 temples presently, but they expect to lose 1/3 of those temples in the next 10 years. 1/3. Over 3,000 temples they expect to close. Our BCA membership, we've lost 25% of our membership in the past 10 years. We can't keep going in that direction. For COVID, we had to bend the curve this way, right? In our BCA membership, we have to bend the curve this way now, in the opposite direction. We have to grow our sanghas and temples. The Shin Buddhism and other schools of Buddhism in this country as well, we have to respond to the spiritual needs of our suffering humanity. So a new Buddhism, a new Shin Buddhism can arise in this culture. So how can we share the Dharma? How can we share the teachings with others to give peace, to give comfort, to give light, to give joy, and a life of gratitude to others? So I think we have to present the practical side of Shin Buddhism. How does Buddhism help us to live a meaningful, fulfilled, peaceful, and settled life? That's how we need to sort of present Shin Buddhism to people in this culture who have a very practical approach to things. We need to show the why of Jodo Shinshu, the why of Jodo Shinshu. Not so much the what, but the why. And the proof of the why is in some of our devout members of our temples. And I like to just share one example. This is the late Sachi Ochiai. She was an OCBC member. She passed away about a little over a year ago during the pandemic. She lived at the age of 100. And she was sharp and alert to the very end. She was our sort of OCBC Myokoning type of person. She attended every Sunday. She attended all the BEC classes. I taught Introduction to Buddhism maybe 8 or 9 times when I was a minister at Orange County. Every time Sachi is there. I said, Sachi, you've taken this course 8 times. I don't think you need to learn Introduction to Buddhism again. She would say, oh no, every time I take the class, I learned something new. I learned something new. And so she was a real listener of the Dharma. Let me share one story about Sachi Ochiai and your own local boy, Reverend David Matsumoto. So Reverend David Matsumoto, of course, one of my close ministerial friends, and I invited him to speak at Orange County many times over the years. I think he's probably spoken at least 5 or 6 times over the years. But on the last time that he came to speak, we're in the back room and we're getting ready to start the service. And we ministers, we don't always keep the best records. And so Reverend David said, hey, the last time I spoke here, did I tell this story? He couldn't recall exactly what message he gave the last time he spoke at Orange County. He didn't want to repeat himself. And I said, oh, I don't think you gave that story. Well, you could tell that story. But he wasn't really sure. But anyway, he gets up to the podium to give his Dharma talk. And he's very honest. So he says, well, I hope I haven't repeated myself. I don't think I gave this message last time. But so he gives the Dharma message and shares that he didn't quite recall what he had spoken of previous times. After the service, Sachi Ochai comes to the back and she says to Reverend Matsumoto, oh, wonderful, wonderful Dharma message you gave today. But, I just wanted to share with you, the first time you spoke here, you talked about this. And then the second time you spoke here, you told this story. And the third time you spoke, you talked about this. And then the last time you gave this wonderful talk about such and such talk. She remembered every one of his Dharma talks. How is she able to remember such Dharma talks? Because she's a deep listener. And every time we had a guest speaker, I had to put this little tape recorder on the podium. And when the Dharma talk started, when I introduced the guest speaker, I had to click that on. So she had these cassette recordings of the guest speakers. She would listen to them over and over and over again. And that's a real listener of the Dharma. That's how it becomes a part of her life. This is Sachi in the middle there. And next to her is another elderly lady that's now 100, Berta Hamada. And these are members of my study class on the larger sutra that I've had for about 15 years. After I became bishop, I haven't been able to continue this class, but these people we studied the larger sutra from the very beginning, line by line, character by character, over the course of 15 years. And we haven't finished it yet. We're still in the beginning part of volume 2. But members like Sachi Ochai, they lived a radiant life, a joyful life, a meaningful life, a fulfilled life, because their lives were grounded in the Dharma. Sachi's greatest joy was to listen to the Dharma, to discuss the Dharma, to share in the Dharma. So if you have just one person in your Sangha like Sachi, your Sangha cannot help but grow and become vibrant. Some years ago, there was a man that joined OCBC from another church in Southern California. And I was a little hesitant because I didn't want to look like a minister who's stealing members from other churches. But I asked this, well, why did you happen to join OCBC? And he said, I just want to be around people like Sachi. I want to be around people like Sachi. Just being around her, they gain something. See? So our sanghas will grow if we even have one person like a Sachi Ochai. So our great challenge for now and for the future is to become such a person of the Nembutsu ourselves. And then our sanghas will naturally grow. Those are my thoughts on this Hoonko for this year. Thank you very much for inviting me to share with you on this very special occasion for your Twin City Sangha Hoonko. Namandavats, 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 namandavats.